Good to see you.
Is my microphone on? It doesn't feel like it's on. Are we on?
Are we good?
All right, we're in business.
I think we're up. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely.
And first off, you're the co-founder or the founder.
I'm the founder.
The founder of the Chamber of Digital Commerce, right?
Yes.
And when did you start that?
July of 2014. So we're in our 9th year.
Amazing. 2014. Right?
We've seen a lot.
I remember the chamber when it started because I also was thinking about how important it was that there would be groups of people helping make sure that legislators didn't make the wrong decisions, and also educating folks on Capitol Hill. So I was really excited when your organization started. We have I'm going to throw out a name, and where you're going to probably be like, oh, I didn't know we knew him. Joe Colangelo. You remember Joe Colangelo from Consumers Research?
Yes. Yeah.
So the Bretton Woods event. I think you went to the very first one.
I went to that event. Were you there?
Not the first one.
Okay.
So Bretton Woods event was put on by a group from Washington, D.C. called Consumers Research. And they're like a policy advocacy group. So they would write articles about.
They're a long-established consumer group, so been around decades before Bitcoin even existed. So the fact that they were paying any attention to Bitcoin in early days was adding legitimacy to the industry. So they were an important voice. Although I think they've kind of got out of it. I don't think they're really doing much. Joe's gone on to do other things.
True. So, but I think it was cool that we were both kind of doing similar things. We just missed each other, right? I think that was.
Where'd you go?
Well, I mean, I've been here the whole time.
Me too.
we ran in a lot of the same circles, but we've never had a chance to really overlap a whole lot. So I think this is great. But today, let's talk a little bit about what the Chamber is doing and how they're affecting policy on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, so just a quick intro on the Chamber of Digital Commerce. We were established in 2014. When we were set up, it was in the aftermath of Mt. Gox and Silk Road. So I really started paying attention to Bitcoin a lot in 2013. I was actually working in the media, and I was reporting on Bitcoin, which, being a journalist and getting to cover Bitcoin in 2013 was like a great gift to give a journalist, because it was insane. Bitcoin was still just kind of very niche cypherpunk group at the beginning of the year. About halfway through the year, we saw a big price rally. So we had really our first bull market. So it started the year trading around like $70. It went up to 1,300, and then this amazing thing happened where Cyprus was going through its bailout with the European Union, and Cypriot started buying Bitcoin during this time of economic uncertainty. And I got to interview the finance minister of Cyprus live on TV and say, what's going on with all these people buying Bitcoin? And he had no idea how to answer the question. But the only reason I got the interview was my dad's friend was roommates with this guy in college. And so I had an in, and he was like, okay, sure, I'll come on your show. But it was a really exciting time, because for me, Bitcoin was this promise of an alternative currency, an alternative monetary system, where I moved to DC to fight for a better economic future. I felt like the fiat system does not represent my values as an American. Like any currency that's literally stealing from its people via inflation, that's immoral and wrong. So I wanted to fight for something better. And I went to DC, learned about Bitcoin. I'm like, this could be it. And so that was the first time that we saw people actually using it as an alternative currency when there was an economic uncertainty. So that was really exciting. So there's all these amazing headlines about Bitcoin in 2013, mid-2013, and then Mt. Gox happened. 70% of all Bitcoin exchanging was happening on Mt. Gox. And then it got hacked, or I think they're still investigating what exactly happened there, but over $500 million worth of consumers' Bitcoin just gone.
And it was part of the class action.
Yeah.
I got another letter in the mail this last
Are
week.
you still waiting? So they still haven't paid out the bankruptcy claims. They're still waiting on the claims.
Yeah.
So that was a big black eye. It was the largest bankruptcy in the history of Japan at the time. And then a couple months or weeks later, you had the Silk Road issue, this website where people were buying and selling drugs, as well as perfectly legal things. Like Bibles, I heard, was one of the main things people bought and sold on Silk Road. But the headlines all over the mainstream media were like, this is just a currency for illicit finance. This is a joke. Oh, or it died, because Mt. Gox went down at the time. People literally thought it died. So as someone who was covering the space and a policy person, it became evident to me that the industry needed to have people who understand this technology in our nation's capital working with policymakers to help them, one, understand Bitcoin's not dead. Two, it has a real world use case. It's a promising technology. It's not just something people are going to use for illicit purposes, but also help guide the public policy process, because at the end of the day, this is open source code. Code is protected by free speech, and we need to protect people's ability to use this technology, because that's protecting their fundamental freedoms as Americans. So that's what we started. In 2014, we launched, and that's the journey we've been on, and it's kept us really busy. The past week or so has been interesting. I think a lot of people are kind of pulling their hair out, but for me, we've never seen an issue quite as big as this, except for when Terra collapsed. That was like a $50 billion stable coin at its height, so arguably that kind of was a larger thing than all the losses at FTX. But there is a lot of fallout, and people are kind of going crazy, and we're continuing to do the same thing of just being a resource to our policymakers, advocating for this technology and people's fundamental rights to have access to it.
So how does the chamber function, like on Capitol Hill, like in Washington D.C.? Like what are we doing? You're a trade organization?
We're a trade organization, so we're a 501c6. We're a nonprofit. The way we operate is very, very simple. Companies and individuals can be a member of the chamber. You pay an annual fee to be a part of the membership, and then everybody gets to participate in the work that we do. We are mission driven, so every single member of the chamber has an equal voice. We're a little bit different than some trade groups, and I spent about 6 months building our governance structure and working with nonprofit lawyers to develop that. A lot of trade associations, they're run by big corporations, and they also don't have founders. Go try to find another trade association that has a founder. It's usually businesses come together and they establish it, and they're working on policy issues specific to that group of companies. We did not want a company to be able to pay to control our voice or to have influence over what we do. So everybody's equal, and we're mission driven. So anything that we're advocating for is for the health and the growth of the industry or the ecosystem as a whole. What that looks like on a daily basis, it varies. So we're very involved on Capitol Hill. I previously worked on Capitol Hill. It's a very large organism to have to navigate. There's 535 members of Congress, 100 Senate, 435 on the House side. And then you have all these committees: House Financial Services, the Agriculture Committee, Banking Committees, Energy and Commerce, so on and so forth. So being able to have influence on the Hill takes a significant amount of time and a big investment, because there are so many people you have to get in front of. So one of the other things that I recognized early in the industry, because you have to also appreciate, when we launched in 2014, the industry was very, very small. Paul knows, because he was there as well, but there just wasn't a lot of companies who could contribute to policy resources, and so kind of crowdfunding that across the industry, where everyone pays or donates a little bit through their membership fees, so we can have people on the ground in DC full time. For a company like Edge to be able to have a presence on the Hill, you'd have to hire teams of people, and that's not really what Edge does, right? Your job is to build a technology company, not walk the halls of Congress. Most companies that have influence on Capitol Hill are very large organizations. Microsoft, for example, has over 300 employees based just a couple blocks from Capitol Hill. That is very much the role that we see our team. Our job is to full-time be that resource in Washington, build those relationships, teach people about this technology, be a resource to them when they have a question. And then if something bad happens, like somebody wants to introduce a bill to, I don't know, restrict people's access to the technology, we're there to stop that. So we're very active on Capitol Hill. We're also very active in the agencies, particularly Treasury, FinCEN, OFAC, and the IRS, as well as the CFTC and the SEC. And then we've also been involved in supporting the administration. As you may have seen, President Biden issued the first executive order on digital assets at the beginning of this year. So we've also been involved in those conversations and all the reports that have come out of the EO.
Keep them busy.
We're very busy. Yeah, I mean, this is an uphill battle. It's always been an uphill battle. When we started, the industry really had a massive reputational issue. And now, we've taken a big step back this week. We're up against these reputational issues again. So a lot of times when you meet with a policymaker for the first time, their first impression is probably not very good.
Right.
So they come to the meeting, probably as a skeptic. And you have to build trust with them and educate them and spend time with them and inspire them to go home and learn this on their own.
But you have some allies in DC, right, that are pro-crypto and are actually helping the cause and doing their part to try to educate their colleagues as well, right?
Yeah, I like to say we're in the business of building champions. When we started, there were no champions for crypto at all in Washington, policymakers. The very first member of Congress that I convinced to actually sit down and meet with us was Congressman Mick Mulvaney, representative from South Carolina. He went on, when Trump was elected president, he went on to go lead the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and then he went on to go be President Trump's chief of staff, which was really interesting because Trump was not favorable to Bitcoin. I don't know if you guys remember the tweets that he put out. But Mick was the first person who would take meetings with us, the first person who came out as a supporter of this technology, and then he co-founded the Blockchain Caucus in 2016 with Congressman Jared Polis, who's now the governor of Colorado. The Blockchain Caucus started with maybe 4 members. Now they have several dozen. So a big part of what we're doing on the Hill is we're meeting with different members and their staff, educating them, helping them get comfortable, and then once they're to that place, we ask them to join the Blockchain Caucus. And so we've doubled that just this Congress, which is amazing. It's a bipartisan group. It's equal representation of Democrats and Republicans, and that's really ground zero for crypto policy on the Hill today.
That's amazing. That's a lot of hard work.
It's hours and hours of education.
Yeah,
hundreds
absolutely.
of hours, if not more, of education.
So I wanted to ask a little bit about, because as you tie this all in together, there's groups like the Uniform Law Commission, right, that has been advocating changes. Well, they were from the first advocates of change at the state level, right, for the Uniform Virtual Currency Businesses Act, right? And then since then, they've been working on changes to the Uniform Commercial Code, right? Which, have you guys been working with them or working on changes for the Uniform Commercial Code as it reflects to crypto and digital assets?
That is not a work product underway at the Chamber.
Okay. Does it overlap, do you think?
We've looked at it before. At the early days of the Chamber, when we first launched, about 90% of our work was state-based. Again, the industry looked very different 10 years ago,
Oh, yeah.
8, 9, 10 years ago, as it did today. Policy at the beginning was really happening at the state level. So in the aftermath of Mt. Gox, we got the New York BIT license. So the New York Department of Financial Services, the superintendent, the head guy, Ben Lawsky, he stated multiple times that, he wanted to be the sheriff of crypto, and he created the BIT license in response to Mt. Gox. If you're not familiar with the BIT license, it was a massive failure. It's still a failure. They should repeal it. It is not friendly to crypto businesses at all. It is incredibly difficult to get a BIT license. By the way, the day he published the final rules in the register, he quit. He left, and his whole team left with him. So there was nobody there to process any applications, and it took years just to get the first handful of companies licensed. And it pushed a lot of business outside of the state of New York. So there was New York that went that way, and then there were a number of other states that went a different direction. So if you're a crypto exchange, today you're regulated at the state level, and you need a money transmitter license. And so New York created a whole different license, the BIT license, but most states just updated their money transmitter licenses to allow for crypto companies to get them. So we assisted a lot of states in making those changes so we could get more companies regulated and licensed and offering services here. And that was the first 2, 3, maybe 4 years. That was a huge part of what we were doing. Now, the big work is really happening on the federal level. So the big efforts underway are comprehensive regulation and legislation that addresses market structure. So instead of a company needing to get a license in every single state they're operating in the United States, getting one federal license, preempting the states. This is a controversial thing, by the way. Not everybody agrees this is the way to go. But that is the conversation in Washington, is getting these companies regulated at the federal level.
So is this going to be something in your eyes that would be separate from like a federal bank charter, like its own kind of federal charter for a digital asset charter, federal digital asset charter?
It would be different than a bank, because these aren't banks.
Right. Okay.
They're not leveraged. They're not rehypothecating. I mean, they shouldn't be.
Well, I mean, they're not supposed to be, right?
But that's beautiful, right? Like the banking system, it creates inflation, by the way. And the fact that we have an opportunity to reimagine how we do financial services and go back to a sound way of banking using digital bearer instruments, I think that will fix a lot of the systemic issues in the financial system.
Right. Well, one of the reasons why I brought up the Uniform Commercial Code in general is because of things like when a company like this goes under, or like the Celsiuses, right? Like this is not the first time that this has happened, but now the courts don't have any precedence on how the waterfall of the money that is left and the bankruptcy procedures that follow with digital assets. There's no precedence for that. So that's why I was kind of wondering if that is something, because of how much, you're getting, I'm sure, interest from Washington about these companies that are not, apparently seem to be having the correct oversight, but somehow getting around it or working around the system, or obfuscating what they're doing, right? So that's where I was coming from with that. But I'd rather talk more about then things like legislature that is happening currently, like Loomis Jewell rent, right? That bill that has been introduced, and where that is going, because things like Custodia, the whole formerly Avanti, which was a bank started by Caitlin Long and her group to basically become a bank for crypto institutions that they can hold digital assets and have a Fed account, a master account with the Federal Reserve. And that's been held up in the courts, and they've been battling with that for a long time. So I'm kind of curious as to
the state of legislation.
Yeah, around that whole direction.
Okay, so in this Congress, Congress works in 2-year sessions. We're currently in the 118th Congress, or the 117th Congress. It will end at the end of this year. So we just had an election, right? And so the new Congress will get sworn in January. So in this congressional session, these past 2 years, there's been 74 bills introduced related to digital assets or blockchain technology or cryptocurrencies. There's only a couple that I'll highlight. Just as an aside, only about 2% of legislation ever introduced will become law. So while there's a lot of bills out there, there's only a handful that will be moved through the legislative process. So the ones I'll highlight first is the Lummis-Gillibrand bill. It's a very comprehensive bill that addresses everything from tax policy, there's some accounting stuff, there's some mining stuff in there, large market structure questions, there's stablecoin provisions in there. So it's very comprehensive. It touches a lot of different areas of the ecosystem. The industry largely is supportive of the bill. And just today, Senator Lummis shared, so the Senate Banking Committee, which Senator Lummis is on, they did a hearing with all the prudential regulators, the bank regulators, and FTX came up, and she said if my bill had been enacted, she didn't think FTX would have ever happened. So that is a big marker. She was very positive about it moving through the legislative process this Congress. It didn't make any movement at all for a couple of reasons. One, again, it's very comprehensive. It's in 4 committees of jurisdiction, so it has to make through all those committees, pass through 4 committees before it can be voted on the Senate floor, and then you have to get a House bill. There's not a companion bill, so the logistics of just getting it done is a lot, and it really didn't make progress in that way, but it garnered a lot of support. So that's one piece of legislation that's important to continue to follow. And by the way, if there's things in there you do or you don't like, you should share them with Senator Lummis and Senator Gillibrand's office, because the bill's going to die at the end of this session. It'll have to be reintroduced, and there'll be opportunities to make changes to it. So that's still being formed. So that's one. The other bill that's important to highlight is the DCCPA. This was not the Sam Bankman bill. It's called the Digital Commodity Consumer Protection Act. This bill became very controversial because Sam personally was pushing this bill, and FTX wanted to see it pass. Now everybody's just very, very skeptical of it because they were supportive of it. What is important to understand about this piece of legislation is that it gives the CFTC, and I know I'm using a lot of acronyms, so this is just how people communicate in DC. It's one of the very weird things about Washington you'll learn. The Commodity Futures Trading Commission, they oversee the futures markets and commodities, of which Bitcoin is a commodity. The conversation this Congress has been giving the CFTC spot market oversight over digital asset commodities. This has not really been talked about enough, so I'm just going to go on a quick aside because people aren't, I think, focused on the big picture of what this bill does. So let's talk about what spot market oversight means. So the CFTC, again, they regulate commodities. Most commodities are like gold, wheat, oil, physical commodities. Yeah. So they have jurisdiction over all commodities, and the SEC does not. So anything that's defined as a commodity is in the CFTC's jurisdiction, not their sister agency, the Securities and Exchange Commission. So if you're in CFTC's jurisdiction, the CFTC is only regulating on the futures markets. So once you have, you're trading on margin, you're trading derivatives, futures contracts, that's what the CFTC is regulating, and they have surveillance level oversight. So they are surveilling those markets in real time on those commodity futures exchanges. The spot markets, so when you're buying and selling commodities at spot, not futures contracts, not derivative contracts, at spot, they're not surveilling those markets. They only have fraud and manipulation authority. So if something happens in a commodity in the spot market and they believe someone's been defrauded or if there's been manipulation, then they can come after you. but is mostly after the fact. They're not going to catch that. They're probably not going to catch it in real time because how it works. So I have two former CFTC chairmen that serve on our advisory board at the chamber. So I've had the benefit of talking with them at length about this. The reason the CFTC is not a spot market regulator is because you would see CFTC enforcement people at cattle auctions, at jewelry stores, at other places. Commodities are traded on spot. So what has been advocated this Congress is to change fundamentally how the CFTC operates to give them spot market oversight of just digital asset commodities, which are today defined as Bitcoin and Ethereum, plus potentially others. So the exchanges that trade Bitcoin and Ethereum and digital asset commodities at spot, they would be regulated very differently than how they are today. So this is a big deal. Not a lot of people are talking about it, but it would have considerable consequences because it's changing the fundamental nature of the CFTC. And so it is one thing we don't want to see people just blow through of like, oh yeah, of course we need more regulation. The crypto space is a hot mess, whatever. This could be a slippery slope. So a lot of other industries are kind of like, we don't know if this whole idea of spot market oversight is a good idea, because what if they start coming over after other commodity markets next? It's not necessarily a great precedent, but this is the debate. So that's what the DCCPA would do. It's a controversial bill because of that, but also because Sam Bankman-Fried was like all for it. The other bill that I'll mention hasn't actually been introduced. So there's a draft form and it's a stablecoin bill. So if you guys follow the policy space, the end of last year, the Treasury's the Federal Open Market Committee.
FOMC? No.
Is it FSOC?
I don't know.
All right, I'm sorry. I've run out of acronyms. It's late. It's a group of 4 regulators. So Jerome Powell, chairman of the Fed, Secretary Yellen, U.S. Treasury, Gary Gensler at the SEC, and Chairman Benham of the CFTC, their group, they got together and they did a report on stablecoins. So the whole premise is that maybe stablecoins are systemic, could pose systemic risk, and so the regulators did a deep dive into stablecoins and they issued a report. That report came out at the end of last year. There's a lot of things that were very dumb in this report. Just gonna lay it out there, my true feelings. We're like a closed group here, right? We're all friends. So the report said stablecoins may cause systemic risk. If you take the entire stablecoin market cap today, it's about the size of like a mid-tier regional bank. It's like nowhere near on the size of systemic, but whatever. And then they said they should only be issued by banks. So this was their report. And by the way, the study, which they spent months and months doing this study, it only applied to US dollar stable coins that are backed 1-to-1. So they did not look at algorithmic stable coins or stable coins that are pegged to other things like foreign currencies or gold or diamonds or whatever. They're just looking at fully collateralized US dollar backed stable coins. So they issue this report, they send it to Congress and said, Congress, you need to take our recommendations and create a bill. So that's what they did. The House Financial Services Committee has spent the past 6 months writing this bill. They wanted to do this in a bipartisan way. So you have the chair of House Financial Services, Maxine Waters, and the ranking member, the Republican, Patrick McHenry. So the two of them, their staff, got together to negotiate the bill language. So it's bipartisan. They got a draft together. It's about 72 pages. During the August recess, they shared it with all the members of the House Financial Services Committee for review. And that's where it stayed. It hasn't progressed any further than that. A lot of members don't like it for a lot of reasons. The things I'm going to highlight for you are 2 things. One, the Fed essentially would have a monopoly on stablecoins. Today, stablecoins are regulated by the states, most notably in New York and Wyoming. The biggest stablecoin issuers are regulated by the state bank regulators of Wyoming and New York. There was a lot of talk about full-on preemption and just having the Fed oversee these stablecoin issuers. They came to a compromise which says, okay, actually the states can continue to be the primary regulator, but the Fed's going to sit on top, and they still have authority to have insight into everything of the issuer, plus authority to tell them they can or they can't do anything. So that's one thing. So the whole states' rights piece is very controversial. A lot of the states do not like this. A lot of the state regulators are calling, their members of Congress and saying this is a problem. So that's one piece of controversy. The other piece of controversy is it essentially would ban, they use the word moratorium, I use the word ban, because let's just be honest about what this does. Any other stablecoin that's not a 1-to-1 US dollar fully collateralized stablecoins. No more algorithmic stablecoins. You can't have stablecoins that are pegged to foreign currencies like a euro coin or anything else. Just a kibosh on everything.
Nothing, right?
So they technically want to grandfather in what's already out there. So the way the language was written back in August when they released the current draft, which by the way is not public. So no, you can't go see it unless you call your member of Congress and convince them to let you see it if they sit on Financial Services Committee. So this hasn't been publicly debated in the industry. But the language in the latest draft was there would be no new issuances of new stablecoins that aren't 1-to-1 US dollar fully collateralized. So they'll grandfather in some existing projects. Awful for innovation. This is coming. But there is some good news. By the way, the stablecoin bill, everybody wants it done. The Fed wants it done. Jerome Powell himself is personally involved in the lobbying of this bill, which is odd. The Fed really should not be involved in legislating. They should be involved in being a bank regulator or fixing the disaster of the economy that's underway. The Fed wants it, the White House wants this bill, and then a lot of members of Congress feel like they need to do something, especially in response to Terra Luna, and so there's a lot of interest to get a stablecoin bill passed. It's not going to happen this year. We're going to see it emerge next Congress, and this is the bill that will have the greatest propensity to move through the legislative process. So we're watching this very closely. We're working with the offices very closely on this, and there's some things in here that I think would not be good for our space.
Is that our biggest fear right now? Is that because of this last 6 to 12 months of disasters that legislation could possibly get pushed through that may not be the best, may not be healthy for the industry, but everyone is just going to slap a flag in the ground and say, consumer protection, and just ride that wave? Is that
Totally.
Is that the biggest fear?
That's the biggest risk I think we have. I think any regulators who are leading by enforcement or who want to be the cop on the beat, they're now really emboldened to go out and enforce against whatever they can find. So that regulation by enforcement approach, I think, is potentially could get worse, which isn't bad for innovation. Which is bad for innovation. And then it's hard to know what legislation's going to look like quite yet. The elections aren't quite done, so we're not totally sure what the makeup of the next Congress is going to be. But these are the three bills that are the most support to move. Will we get something new in response to FTX? It's very possible. That stablecoin bill, that algorithmic piece was never in there. It only came after the Terra Luna collapse. They're all like, we have to do something about algorithmic stablecoins. So then that provision emerged. So will there be something new that emerges out of FTX? Probably.
I'd like to open it up to questions from the floor. Down here? Madison?
Just curious if in that last bill there, how would it be possible to regulate or prevent even stablecoin issuance for other currencies, and how how could we have such domain over fiat like that to cancel out all the other fiats? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, so that's a really smart question. So we have been doing briefings on algorithmic stablecoins for the members of the Financial Services Committee just to help them understand what they're trying to legislate. And we actually think that provision would be completely unenforceable and make them look very silly. And so if their concern is Terra Luna, well, let's first understand what happened there, dissect that, see if there's any gaps and maybe fill them. But just doing like a blanket moratorium, that can't possibly be the most effective way to mitigate against the issues we saw with Terra Luna.
That would kill the propensity, I think, to getting through.
It's very anti-innovation. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, potentially you could argue is against the First Amendment, preventing code from coming to existence, trying to say some code is illegal over another form. That does seem at odds with the First Amendment. Code is speech.
Thank you. Oh, wait, and actually, yeah. Do you think possibly that this could ever be under the jurisdiction of FCC as speech, or is it always SEC is going to have domain because Bitcoin's commodity? It's not speech.
So and I'm not the lawyer. You're the lawyer, right?
No, I just stayed at a Holiday Inn Express.
FCC law is like unfair and deceptive acts and practices. That's kind of the main.
Not protecting speech.
Is that their job to? No, that's not. No,
Okay.
no.
They do regulate like things like airwaves, and so they do. I think they do some of that, but I don't think they protect the First Amendment necessarily.
Transmission, or like a signature on the blockchain signature isn't a transmission.
I don't know. It's a very good question.
Thank you.
But FCC is mainly looking at consumers being defrauded.
So like when we do when we do investigations for SIM swap victims, right? That is an FCC complaint. Like we would have a victim complain to the FCC because it's going through the telecom providers, which are regulated by the FCC. So
Cool.
that's where people report those.
Thanks.
So I have a question on, you were talking about the CFTC and sort of Chris Giancarlo and his team's work. And I don't know what I don't know, and you might have to help me with the acronyms. But if the CFTC doesn't get oversight into the spot market, help me understand where does that go? And my presumption is the SEC, but I don't really know. And then part two, how do CBDCs work into all of this conversation around stablecoins?
Okay, so I'll take the first question first on spot market oversight. So one of the arguments people will make in support of giving the CFTC spot market oversight is because the SEC has been such a challenging regulator to deal with. They've pretty much refused to give like actual guidance to industry on which digital assets are a security and which ones are not. So, and the whole thing's kind of ridiculous. You literally are having to rely on speeches and statements by the people that work at the SEC or the CFTC to understand which digital currencies are a commodity or a security. And they've said, so the CFTC has said, well, people at the CFTC, and by the way, speeches and statements are not legally binding. This isn't actual guidance, but this is how our government operates. This is why, people don't like politics. This is why I do this work, because it's this broken. At the SEC, they've said Bitcoin and Ethereum is a commodity. The SEC chair, this SEC chairman has said Bitcoin is a commodity, and he hasn't weighed in on Ethereum. He's actually questioned Ethereum as a commodity. So that means every other cryptocurrency that's out there is pretty much in legal limbo. And so the exchanges who are listing cryptocurrencies, they are taking on legal risk because it's not actually certain. They pay astronomical amounts of money to lawyers to look at a token and try to determine, based on the information that we have, based on how we test, which is 80 years old, based on other enforcement actions. Would this digital asset be a commodity or not? And so they're trying to make the best guess. So it's impacting innovation in a big way. And puts everybody at legal risk that touches anything except Bitcoin. So that is one of the arguments for giving the CFTC more authority by making them a spot market regulator, because it could potentially add balance to the SEC. So one of the other things we've heard kind of off the record is that the CFTC won't come out and say other cryptocurrencies are a commodity, thus not a security, because they're not allowed to get ahead of the SEC. Like, the SEC's been told, like, you're the lead on this.
But even inside the SEC, though, isn't there conflict between, like, what Hester Peirce is saying versus...
The commission doesn't even agree. Yeah,
right.
The commissioners don't even agree.
Yeah.
So it's really bad for innovation. It's bad for businesses.
How can you make any progress, or even... It just seems like the only people who are winning are lawyers. I'm not a lawyer, by the way. Yeah, I mean, as much as we all need guidance, right? The guidance that they are giving is contradictory, or there isn't enough to move forward. So we're all just going in a direction, fingers crossed, right?
Yeah, everyone takes on a significant amount of legal risk. So the idea is, like, maybe this will make the CFTC the lead regulator and we'll get more clarity. That's kind of like one of the arguments people have said in support of this bill. But the bill, the DCCPA, does not clarify the definition of digital asset securities or commodities. So the fundamental issue of which ones are in which bucket doesn't actually get addressed. And my guess, just based on my observations, is that the bill was purposefully written in that way, because even though this is not right, the heads of the agencies have a lot of power over the legislative process. If the chairman of the SEC says, we don't like that, they probably won't move it forward. So they had to write the bill from their perspective. The committee had to write the bill in a way that would be politically pleasing. But, you know, I question if this is going to help move the industry forward. It needs a much more closer look, and we've got to address the bigger regulatory questions. The other questions on CBDCs and how that impacts stable coins. I guess CBDCs would compete with stable coins. So, should the private sector be competing with, the government's monopoly on money? I don't know if that's really commensurate with American values. Probably not. The bigger issue with stable coins is that they're a tool for censorship and they're a tool for surveillance. And I think they're very dangerous. I've spent a lot of time over the past several years studying and trying to understand what China has built. I've read over 200 patent applications that the Chinese government filed on their CBDC, the digital yuan, and it is full surveillance. They can see everything. And if you just look at what China has done from their social scoring program, where you get downgraded if you jaywalk, or if you, do something the CCP doesn't like, and then that's connected to your money, that has the power to control an entire population. So I think the private sector's innovations of stable coins they're already here, right? They're, a decade ahead of any CBDC that the Fed could build. Plus, I think the issue of the Fed issuing a stable coin poses significant threats to our society.
Agreed.
One here and one in the back. We'll try and get to as many people as possible.
I was curious, did you think it was rather odd that FTX had 12 of the biggest, lenders and investors, using them or working with them? I mean, we're talking about Andreessen and Horowitz. I mean, there was a list of them. And when this blew up, you would think that they would be at the front of the line going, what happened? And these aren't stupid people. So there wasn't this big outcry that I thought was going to happen with this particular issue. Was it because it's in the Bahamas and it doesn't belong, you know, they can't go after it? I mean, I'm confused about that. I mean, they were working with them. It was billions of dollars. They made a lot of money with them. You know, they left, but they weren't out there, you know, hi, aren't you going to do something? What are you going to do? What are you going to do with these people? You didn't hear, you know, anything from them.
Silence from their investors.
Yeah, they just went, they moved on. And these people.
They just wrote down their investment to zero and try to like move
forward.
forward.
And these aren't stupid. These aren't stupid people. So is it because they were out of their jurisdiction, because they're in the Bahamas, they can't touch them? You know, the SEC, nobody can touch them. I mean, where's the outcry? I don't get it. I mean, it's not Enron, so it's not that big, right? But still, what's your take on that? What's actually going on here?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of people want to know what actually happened under the hood there. I mean, I think we had, these are my opinions. Like, I'm not the courts. I can't define, you know, what exactly happened under the hood, but my observations is that you had some bad and potentially evil people doing some really bad things. To me, it looks evil. How do you steal $10 billion of your customer's fund and it evaporates? What could have possibly been going on there? Whatever it is not good. And the people who do know are probably going to go to extreme lengths to keep that quiet. So it's scary. I mean, it is frightening to be that close to something so awful. I have no relationship with FTX or Sam, but I did testify in front of the Senate earlier this year, and Sam testified right before me, and I sat at the same table with him. And he was advocating for that bill we were talking about, which was, the whole situation was kind of bizarre. But to me, it's scary that I was that close to something so awful. So in terms of what happened, we have to, I guess, leave that to the investigators. Hopefully they can, you know, do something about it. I think this is a failure of a lot of things. One, it is a failure of not having a regulatory system that works in the US. SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce, she went on Bloomberg on Thursday, and I went right after her, and she said that the SEC needs to take ownership for what happened. We've created an environment where companies don't know how to get compliant with the law, and so because it's so uncertain, everything is just going overseas, and we've driven so much activity overseas. So that's one thing. There's a lot of great conspiracy theories, so it's been very entertaining to go on crypto Twitter and read all the conspiracy theories. I'm not gonna verify or like validate them, but this is there's some really interesting theories about what happened under the hood, but I can say there's no way it's anything good. And then for all the investors, I mean, that was a good point. Sequoia, you know, other highly reputable investors. How does this happen? So I asked a friend of mine earlier this week, like, how did this get through Sequoia? And he said they probably just didn't understand the financial statements. Probably didn't understand, you know, the FTT token and how it works. They probably just didn't understand it. So it's not good.
Or what it was being used for.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we got a couple back here. Do you mind taking a couple more?
Sure.
Yeah. Hey, is this?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. So my question is, so I read recently that the crypto industry has spent collectively more money in this midterm election cycle lobbying in Washington than ever before. And I was just curious, like, in your opinion, how effective has that been? And how effective will lobbying continue to be for the industry moving forward?
Yeah, so on elections, Sam SBF gave about $40 billion mostly to Democrats, and then Ryan Salame, who's the head of, what is he the head of? Something else, another business unit. He's one of the co-founders, I think. He He spent another $20 billion of his own money, mostly supporting Republicans. So of a lot of that money, so I have a report. I've looked at all of the donations that Sam gave or contributions Sam gave. It's mostly to PACs, political action committees, not candidates directly, although he did give to candidates directly, but there's caps, like an individual can only give a couple $1,000s to a candidate directly, but you can give a PAC a lot more money. So one of the PACs that he gave multi-millions of dollars to, 19 of the candidates that they backed were elected. So in terms of the investigations that need to happen out of the fallout of this are incredibly extensive. But putting that aside, the crypto industry influence in elections, I think Sam represented like a huge percentage of the money. But at the end of the day, elected officials do have to run, and I do think we should support policymakers that support us, because we're outnumbered right now in Congress. We have more people that don't understand this space than people who do. And so for the ones who do, we want to support them because we want them to stay in office. So as the industry continues to grow and people continue to become a part of this space, very much encourage everyone to be involved in the political process. I'm not going to encourage people to give campaign contributions. That's a very personal decision if you want to do that. But what you can do is everyone can participate in the education. So everyone here should know, who your elected representatives are and what their position on crypto is. Go ask them. And if you're not satisfied with their answer, say, can I sit down and tell you about what I do in this space and why I care about this space? And that's what moves the needle more than anything. It's actually constituents. It's not lobbyists. It's the people the politicians serve. That's not always the case. There are people who are influenced by special interest groups, but the strongest voice is always the constituents. So we very much encourage everyone to talk to their elected representatives and educate them about this technology.
Hey, so you've chosen to at least spend the current moment of your life and all your energy and time into helping America be an innovator in crypto. Thank you from all of us. Is there something, so with all these laws coming down, is there something that would make you change your mind and possibly think that America may not continue to be that kind of, force for innovation in crypto?
Yeah, it's a great question. At the end of the day, and I've, over the past couple of months, been reading history books about the founding of the United States, like what we were founded on, like what were the principles of our founding fathers? Why did people come here? And why were people so passionate? And why were so many people, why did people put their lives on the line to create the United States? It is important so one of the things that I found that's really interesting about the US is that I think we were the first country in the world to legally represent the concept of liberty. And there's a difference between liberty and freedom. Liberty is your liberty that's God-given, and nobody can take that from you. And the US recognizes that as every human has liberty and the government can't take your liberty from you. Freedom is a right the government gives you and they can take it away from you. So the concept of freedom, of liberty, is the bedrock of our society, and that's what's made the United States the most prosperous nation in the world. When I think about Bitcoin and open blockchains, so if you can summarize it in one word, it's freedom, right? It is a freedom-enabling technology. It allows us to have more control of our assets, our money, less reliance on the state or centralized intermediaries to be able to transact in everyday life. So at its heart, I think this technology represents the values of our country. And if we can focus on that and educate our policymakers and our regulators on that, I think it's hard to be on the other side of this. And I think it's our right as Americans to fight for our rights. I know this may sound like, I don't know, everybody says this, but we have benefited from the exorbitant privilege. We have luxuries that are really ridiculous that we take for granted. But for generations before us, Americans and the people that came here fought for us to have these fundamental freedoms. And it is our job to fight for those. And that's what Bitcoin is to me, and that's why I do what I do, and hopefully, encourage other people to be a part of that as well.
I have a question about the Digital Chamber of Commerce.
Chamber of Digital Commerce.
Chamber of Digital
Yes.
Commerce. Has the Chamber of Digital Commerce interacted with, if you could speak to it, with the Department of Defense in any way when it comes to lobbying or the use of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, since they, have the biggest bag in the room? I was wondering if any of the acronyms that revolve around the DoD have had any relationship or, education conversations with you guys.
We have not. No, we have not engaged with DoD. We're mostly involved with the regulators, the financial regulators. There may be other people talking to the DoD, but we're not. We haven't.
So my second thing would be the defense contractors that mostly send a lot of money and take a lot of money from the DoD, like Northrop and Boeing and Raytheon. I know that Raytheon has a blockchain department at their company. I'm wondering if they are lobbying Congress for their own form of blockchain regulations.
They might be. I don't know. But what you can do, so all lobbyists, I'm a lobbyist, we employ lobbyists at the chamber. You have to register with the ethics committees. So every lobbyist has to disclose to the government what they're lobbying on and who they're talking to. So you could go to the lobby reports of all those companies, and if they're lobbying on blockchain, it would be in their report. So that would be public information. I haven't looked it up, but you should do that. And then share it with me, because I'd love to know too.
I didn't know you could do that. Speaking of things that maybe people don't know, how can individuals who maybe not members work with the chamber or find resources from the chamber? Are there additional resources for the public?
Yeah, absolutely. So we very much lead on the principle of transparency. So there's a ton of stuff on our website. It's digitalchamber.org. All of our members are on our website, so all the people who contribute to our work. All of our policy positions, we publicly post them on our website. So any bill that we've supported, any kind of concepts that we're pushing, it's all up there. So you can go look at everything. And you can use them for your own resources too if you agree with them. If you don't, tell me. Like, if we're not in line with the community, I want to know. We vet our stuff heavily through hundreds of people before we go to market with anything. But it's important to me that we represent the views of the industry, including just average people, not necessarily companies, but real users of the technology. We are going to have a fly-in on March 22nd. We haven't done one in a couple years because of COVID, but literally the entire community is invited to come to Washington and go meet with your elected representative and go teach them about this technology. We haven't announced this yet, but I can share it. We'll have a registration process up within a couple of weeks, but you can come to DC and be a part of that education effort. That's important. Again, it's constituents that I think have a really important voice. If you don't want to come to Washington, you can do that work here. All your representatives have office here, your state representatives are here, but also your federal representatives have offices in their districts. So educating your policymakers is the most important thing we can do.
That was you.
That sounded like Maria.
That was you with Maria.
Yeah, okay.
All right, that is about all we have time for. I know we all have more questions, but I do want to make sure we get to the lightning round because we missed that the past couple meetups. So if we want to give a warm applause to our speaker
Thank
tonight,
you.
this was amazing. If you would be able to share some ways people can get in contact with you and your team, I know you kind of mentioned that, I think that would be helpful. In the meantime, if we can get some people lined up for the lightning round, we give everybody about 60 seconds to pitch their project, their group. Maybe you're hiring, maybe you're looking for a job. This is a good time to get lined up.
Yeah, and if you guys want to reach out to me, I'm active on Twitter. My handle is @PerianneDC, PerianneDC. or just go to our website, digitalchamber.org. There's a contact form, and I receive those emails personally.
All right, does anyone want to do a quick lightning round?
Can you explain what a lightning round is?
Yeah, so we give everybody the stage for just like about a minute to talk about what you're doing, what you're building, what you're growing. If you have anything to share, this would be a good time. If not, that's cool too. I know there's people in here that have things to share though, so. All right, come on up.
Didn't expect this. Hello. Wonderful talk. Thank you so much. Very informative. I did a crypto advocacy focused DAO project that failed. Love to chat. Was really concerned about legal issues and also hiring lobbyists and stuff like that. Very cool. But my thing is SoulPress. WordPress, WooCommerce plugins using Solana blockchain. We have a payment gateway with Solana USD coin, a stable coin. And that's the beta version's out right now. We're also launching a login and registration plugin for all 400 million WordPress websites out there using any Solana wallet like Phantom. It's all free, open source, will be forever. Thank you.
Wow, cool. What's your name?
Justin. I sent in an email to your website.
Justin, that was Justin. Do we have another one?
Yeah.
Awesome. Chase?
Awesome talk. Thank you so much. Hey everyone, I'm Chase. I'm part of the Ethereum San Diego team. We are a adjacent community who's also hosted a couple events here at Edge. Shout out to the great team and all the great guests that they bring into our local community. So yeah, if you're curious in Ethereum development or kind of just on the fence and thinking about more building on crypto, we always love to host new and aspiring devs. We've got an event this Thursday, and we'll be discussing the Foam Proof of Location Network, and then we've also got one next Tuesday. So we're staying busy. So if you could go ahead and follow us on Twitter at ETH San Diego, ETH San Diego, and you'll keep up with us there. So thanks so much, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, we got two more coming up. Oh, whoever.
Hey, I used to be a product manager for Everstake Knows, and just want a little comment and then just introduction. I think one of the narrow part about FTX and Binance is that KYC program. KYC, who doesn't know your customer, basically checking your documents to give you right to purchase anything. And because of that, I don't know also if you know that all the assets that you purchase through trading platforms are kept in at FTX, Binance pocket. And you don't know whether it's belong to you, only what they show you think belongs to you until it's not. And I think I don't know why it's not been public. I don't know. I think we should fight for freedom. Remove regulations. Remove regulations on things like KYC, because I'll explain. So when I own the wallet, like let's say, I don't know, wallet that like written in the blockchain and belongs to me, nobody could take it from me. I could have invested in something that is a bubble, but that's my own fault. Why somebody need to know my documents to check it? And just for a little more also interesting, I'm from Ukraine, moved with my wife and kids before the war. But anyways, when I came here, I realized I can't purchase anything here. I can't purchase anything because I don't have social security number, and every platform, trading platform, requires that. So basically, whether I have business or not, I could not trade in US because I'm not a US citizen. I could have LLC here, but I could not trade. Do you understand the thing? I think, my opinion, humble, small opinion, that the whole idea of blockchain, and one of the person who is fighting for rights like that is the founders of Polkadot, who's trying to make it as private as possible and remove all trading regulations so that it would be absolutely private. Currently, I'm working on developing monitors and explorers for blockchains. I don't know if you know what staking is, then you'll know. And if you're interested to know and be somehow part of it, it's just right now is a concept, an idea, and it's going to be a startup very soon. So if you're somehow interested and want to know and contribute to it, please come to me. I'll stay here for next 15 minutes, and you can just approach me. I used to work in Everstake until I
This is
moved
also
here.
a live stream, so how can people get a hold of you?
Oh, that would be
Twitter or-
Olist24 Twitter. Olist24. OLES24.
Great.
Thank you. All right, we're gonna do one more. Did you want to do it? Okay, one more lightning round.
Yeah, Thursday night at Quantum Brewing, there's a pretty good crypto event. This Thursday, it's one Thursday a month. They're a local brewery, and they actually accept cryptocurrency for payment. So, get out there and kind of support somebody who actually accepts crypto transactions. And it's there's a good talk, good informational group, a lot of people with a lot of knowledge there. If you don't remember, you can find it on grouptopics.com. Quantum's on there, the event's on there, and the group hosting the event's on there. So, yeah, check it out. Meet some people, learn some things Thursday night.
What time?
6:30. Yeah. Look on grouptopics.com. I don't know. It's in there. Search cryptocurrency or Bitcoin, and it'll show up. I don't know off the top of my head, but it's I've been going to it for a while. San Diego Bitcoiners. Yeah. But it's not just Bitcoin. It's there's a lot of cryptocurrency, blockchain knowledge there. So yeah, check it out. Hope to see you there.
Speaking of upcoming meetups, we have a couple upcoming at the Edge office. You can find all of our events at edge.app/events. We have a Zcash meetup, not next Thursday, that's Thanksgiving, the one after, the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. We're hosting a technical meetup here for Chainlink on December 6th, and then we're also hosting Vinny Lingham at our next December Bob. I'm going to go ahead and post that tomorrow, so be sure to RSVP. Other than that, once again, thank you to our sponsors, and thank you all for being here. It's been a pleasure.